I'm Seamless.
My name is Wyatt Troy.
And I want to welcome everybody to Behind the DAW.
We interview artists and music industry experts on an emotional, philosophical, and artistic level to get inside their heads, gather the best information, and then bring it back to you. By the way, this is a companion podcast to our new YouTube series, In the DAW, where we invite artists to dissect their songs in real time. If you have any artists you would like to see come on the show, or if you have any feedback in general, you can contact me at wyatt@musicandstuffllc.com.
So to get you started off, get you in the deep mindset, do your best to try and answer these ageless questions, all right?
Dope.
Question number 1. Why do we put round pizzas in square boxes?
It's easier to ship the boxes when they're deconstructed to the pizza places.
Is that really the reason?
That's usually why things are square. It's harder to make them rounded, obviously. It's more manufacturing cost, but it's also like, think about a spherical object. Like if you stack a bunch of spheres together, there's empty space in there that you're wasting. Shipping wise, space and weight is king. So the square stuff wins.
Oh my gosh. We're off to a good start, man. This is good. Are onion rings just vegetable donuts?
Vegetable donuts. Yeah, I guess they are if you think about it. Donuts are fried, so are onion rings. So yeah, they are.
Which one's healthier?
Onion rings.
And then kind of the deepest question of the 3, which is, if there were 2 people who could read minds and they read each other's minds at the exact same time, would they just be reading their own minds?
That depends a lot on how you classify, quote unquote, reading a mind. To be perfectly honest, I think the best anyone could do is just whatever current electrical stuff is doing, which is like not kind of like an all you thing. That's like only what we're kind of thinking about right now thing. And I would think personally, if you were the kind of person who could just read that in somebody, you had enough experience to kind of compartmentalize that away from yourself. So it's more like you're holding a phone up against someone else's phone and just going beep for no reason.
You ready to get into the really deep stuff, like the beautiful things? How you doing today, dude?
I am doing excellent.
That's fantastic. Your studio is looking amazing as usual. How's things in the studio?
Well, it's a carefully orchestrated ruse that this camera angle contains only the stuff that isn't a complete trash pile right now.
How often do you clean your room?
Whenever I do a video. If it takes a long time to do a video, like, it gets bad.
Diving into the deep end. Seamless is joining us today for Behind the DAW. You know, just from the questions, the silly-ish questions that I've already asked you, you already gave some really fantastic answers. So now that we're going to hop into the deep, serious questions, I can only imagine where this is going to go. Seamless, why do you do what you do? Why do the YouTube channel? Why do music? Why do anything that you currently do?
Okay, well, the why music question is basically just because of my parents. My dad especially. His whole family, his uncles, all his people, they were like the kids in the garage in a band when they got there in the 60s, you know, like those kinds of people. And like he grew up and like to become a programmer like my mother, and that's why they know each other really. And my dad and my mom decided that it'd be a good idea that I be doing piano as a kid, just as a thing that kids do. I was kind of good at it, but like I hated it. I can't express to you how much I hated as a child practicing piano. Like I didn't see a goal to it. I didn't really feel like I was doing it, but like they made me do it a half hour a day, so I did it. And like I went to competitions, and the idea is that I got kind of like familiar, and I also developed pretty decent chops just from essentially like just a thing I did. Actually creating music for myself didn't come into play until high school. I went to a performing arts high school. It sounds like I was kind of intending to be a person who was going to be into like producing, but I went to a performing arts high school as essentially a last ditch to get out of the Agawam public schooling system. Leveraging my piano chops was kind of a, hey, I can do this thing kind of deal, because even though like it wasn't a thing I wanted to do, it was something I could do. Eventually got me into contact with what they refer to as the paideia. Other schools have like vacations in between semesters. We had this thing where you spent like a week or two doing just one thing all day for the whole school day. Like this is just the tip of the iceberg for how ridiculous my high school was. Let me just tell you about that. The particular one that I chose was called electronic music production, and like that just sounded cool. So I went to go do that, and that is where I discovered FL Studio 3, still called Fruity Loops legally. And that was my introduction to being like, I could like be in control of music. How cool is that? Instead of just playing it. And that was why I got into doing like producing. This was 2004, all right? The point of that is that this was before YouTube. YouTube didn't exist until 2005. And that meant that as I was trying to learn, there was just nothing out there about how to do any of this stuff. And like, it took me a long time to learn about really basic things. Like I joke about how it took me 8 years to learn how to use Citrus. And like, that's because no one told me like the squarest one about how FM works. And like, it's really not difficult things, but unintuitive things. And no one out there knew how to talk about it. And the people who did not want to, because it was an edge. like Noisia quite famously was very tight-lipped about their sound design and would at least say like either they didn't know how to do what they wanted to do again, or that they should not tell us because it would ruin our creative capacity to do better things. That was a thing they said. That's fine if that's their opinion, but it still kind of pissed me off as someone who just wanted to know how to do it so I could do the better things. Like from that was always my goal. Years and years and years later, I actually kind of fell out of doing electronic stuff. I basically kind of gave up on it. I was like, well, I can't figure out sound design. I can't figure out anything about it. So I went into metal. Also, like film scoring. I really wanted to do big epic stuff. I got really into like Rhapsody of Fire and like Dimmu Borgir and that kind of stuff. And I really wanted to be like hardcore as epic symphonic stuff. And so suddenly I got chops in like orchestration and like trailer music and that kind of thing. And also I have 11 guitars. I don't need 11 guitars. I have 11 guitars. Some of them are basses. But the point is that I got that so that I could have because shreddage didn't exist back then. And like there was no really good fake guitar sound. So I like had to get a guitar if I just wanted a guitar sound in a song. That's where I got my guitar chops. Around that time is when I started to use Harmor. And Harmor is a plugin, if you're unfamiliar, that can do this thing called resynthesis, where it breaks audio down into its additive molecular harmonic components to reconstruct it as something that you can control like a synth. The dope thing about this is like the core of what was dope about the 2004 to like 2007 like hardcore drum and bass sound design was this concept called resampling. That was mostly driven by the limitations of hardware and also like computers back then, because like we can just have a chain of like 1,000 EQs doing whatever we want now, but like back then that would have killed the computer. So if you wanted to do that, you had to render your audio and do it again over and over and over and over and over again. And that's resampling. And that was what made some of the coolest sound design at the time. Resynthesizing with Harmor changed everything, because then you could suddenly do stuff to it that would take just so much resampling just instantly, and then you could resample it, and it got real far and real deep, and suddenly I could do all these sounds I wanted to do. I wanted to do pretty much all this stuff that I just given up on because I thought it was too hard. And I was like, this isn't how any of this stuff was done, but this is so cool. And I was just struck by this like people must know kind of like vibe. I was like, I have to tell people. And I made like a crappy little video about it. It was the first how to bass video, but it wasn't called how to bass. It was just called like FM and resampling in Harmor or something like that, like what the topic was. But it was funny because it got popular. Like ImageLine blogged it on their Facebook page. And like that's where like a lot of my first subscribers came from, was them being like on their 400,000 like Facebook page. They're like, here's this cool bass video. And I'm like, "Grr." Suddenly, I'm like, big time people came in, and I made another video, and like I realized that I could make this joke if I called it How to Bass 2 Bass Harder because of Die Hard, because I like Die Hard a lot. So, but to do that, I had to retroactively name the other video How to Bass. And so that's where the How to Bass series was born. And like at this time, I had not planned at all to be like a YouTuber. Like I had accidentally made a really popular Minecraft video once because it was about note blocks. Like a year later, this suddenly with popularity with the How to Bass videos, it's like, okay, how do I do this on purpose now? And like at first it was weird. If you go look at those videos, I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about. Like I'm all like dreary and like I'm talking to you now like I'm all animated and stuff. And those old videos, I'm, hi, I'm Seamless. I have this video. I'm going to talk to you about this bass, and it's bad. It's bad stuff. But like I learned quickly that it could be as bad as I want if I had the stuff that people wanted to know about. And it just kind of weirdly worked out at that time. This is like 2012 now, 2011-y, 10-y kind of thing, that I just happened to have the right stuff. I had the stuff people wanted to know about. Eventually I got the hang of it, but like it's also pretty characteristic of the stuff that I do, that a lot of my like best business decisions were not decisions made by me, or were stuff that just kind of happened. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing that now. Making sound design tutorials on YouTube was one of them. Another kind of weirdness was that I was still trying to make music. I was still trying to like be in a metal band and like be I wanted to be a producer and like sell music and do the whole touring thing, but that was not where things were going. And I had this weird little crossroads where after I had made the track Bass Antics, because I had made this track called Dreams of Bass after years of doing metal and not listening to electronic stuff at all, and it sounds weird and doopy, but then like I was like, okay, I gotta go reference a track, and like I go listen to Feed Me stuff, and then I come back and I make Bass Antics, and people started to get it when Bass Antics happened, and I was like, okay, cool. But like I listened to that and like it sounds bad to me. It still sounds bad to me. Like it sounds worse now because it's old, but like even back then it sounded bad to me because that wasn't what I was trying to do. I was trying to sound like a whole bunch of other stuff, and like I just couldn't quite get it, but like my attempts to get there were apparently enough for other people. I didn't really get that at the time, and so my decision was, if I can't be that good, I might as well not try to be a musician. But hey, people want to know about this stuff, so let's use it as a teaching tool. And that's where I started like selling projects and doing the making of and that kind of thing, extra content about like the actual projects themselves. And like that is another kind of like accidental business thing that has turned out to be something that I couldn't have planned if I tried. A good example about how that works out now in modern times is like I can put up whips on my YouTube page that I'm just kind of working on, and they can get more views and more action and thus pay me more than actual released full done songs of mine. And like I could like, you know, also finish the songs and release them, and I'm gonna for a whole bunch of them, but like even the ones that people hate, that them being there hating it makes me money. Like how weird is that? How do you like, that's not something that like I think about a lot, and I guarantee you they don't either, but like it means that I have a weird freedom, and it'll still work out, especially because I'm using it as a teaching tool. People don't have to like my music. They can like what how I talk about it. It's not even really a necessity for them to even like the genre, if they do or not.
So where you're at right now, you know, it kind of sounds like you basically have like these two sides of the spectrum of where your career has been. One has been on like the musician side, you're actually like creating music. The other side is, you know, you actually teaching it. So on the spectrum, do you bounce between the two, or do you live in somewhere in the middle, or are you kind of off to one side?
It's more like I just kind of float around in the middle and allow the byproducts of that to be teaching elements, whatever they may be. Like I tried to like go hard on the teaching thing and like make a regular schedule of like how to bases every Friday and like these streams all these times, whatever. And like it was fun doing that, but it was hard. Just as it is to make regular music, it's hard to be creative on demand like that. It's hard to like always have good ideas, and I definitely repeat myself a lot in some of the more modern how to bases, and like that was getting untenable. And in the old days, I used to just make a how to base whenever I came up with one. It could have been like 3 in a day, or it could have been 1 a month. And like that's kind of where I am now, where I just sort of only do a new like kind of piece of educational content if it's something relevant and good, and like every one of them, because I really don't like putting out crap. Huge reason I was gravitated towards being like, I need to tell people about this, is because like so much could have been changed about the musical landscape by decades if this information had been available publicly at the time. And there were people who knew it. The technology was there, and it was all just about having the creative edge in like a competitive music scene that people barely even knew about in the grand scheme. If you think about it, like this is all niche stuff. Like we talk about it hardcore like it's our life, because it is, but it's not pop music. It's not really like metal's not very popular or very like, it doesn't make a lot of money. Like EDM as like an umbrella thing kind of is, but this is back in a time before the word EDM was even used by anybody. So like, what does that tell you about what that war even made even sense back then? So like, I made the content as if like, if I were teaching myself, like if me back then wanted to have learned this stuff, how would I have wanted to learn it? How would I have wanted it to be presented to me? And that's always been my guiding like principle towards how my videos are structured, which is why I speak 40 miles a minute and tend to gloss over strange ideas.
The kind of the overall vibe that I'm getting from you is that you wanted to know this stuff, you know, whether it was about synthesis or about this or about sound design or about that, you know, it could be about technically anything, but it absolutely infuriated you that it wasn't around. Like no one was talking about it. No one wanted to talk about it. And you're like, I don't want other people to go through that. I want people to know what this stuff is, and I want to do it in the most logical fashion possible. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Well, logical, perhaps. The difficulty is that like a lot of the stuff that like is the game changer for these things is not intuitive business. Like the way that FM works at its core, when you really explain it to somebody, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like in the way that if you didn't know about that, like, because as a result, it is not really like a one-way fixes all approach to kind of like teaching a person how this stuff works. Like a lot of people function well with like hands-on showing it. Some people like written down like a manual kind of thing. Some people like the videos. I was doing it the way that I did it, the way that I wanted to present it to me, because that was the only way that I could ever have been sure that it would be at least a little bit effective. Like, and that it would have worked for someone who was like me, if that person should ever exist again. And because that was the only way I could guarantee that there was a perspective that could be met with the information that it needed. Otherwise, I was just like, I didn't want to do like the hyper produced, like here's the menu, go on, and like a guy just wrote reading stuff that might as well just be a textbook, because that does not work on me. It does not help me. Like there were tutorials even at the time when I started doing this. Like in particular, there was one that did actually teach me about FM that was also just the worst tutorial ever, and it was popular.
Was it from Dubspot?
Yeah, and like it was bad.
With Chris Petty?
It was the Petty test. It was like, here's how to sound like Skrillex and kill the noise, and here's how to do all that stuff. And I'm like, I'm ready. I watched it, and like he did the thing ultimately. Like he did show me that if you FM'd a tone by a higher tone to put it together on fundamental, that it sounds like a monster. But he did it with a sine wave, and it sounded nasty. It didn't sound like anything like he promised. And I walked away with that, with like eventually knowing that, oh yeah, if you modulate the volume of the modulator, it changes raised the intensity of the FM, which I actually didn't know before watching that video. But like, if I had known anything about FM and I had seen that video, I'd have been mad. And it's real funny that like I managed to get that like really crucial piece of information out of like a really hurt my video soul. When I eventually tackled that topic myself, I made sure that my like examples were in any way. And that kind of stuff is also why I tend not to name drop people. Like, you don't tend to see like I had to sound like Skrillex and like I did the 75K thing, but like stressing abundantly that it was just me trying to sound like it, not that I did. No one who has ever promised that stuff has ever like matched what I wanted from it. I do not like doing that, even though it's been pointed out to me that like I could probably get close enough that I could do that, and it would actually increase my views if I did, because that's again talking about the unintuitive stuff. How else do people know how to find what I'm doing? Like, how else? They don't know how to ask like what is a filter FM like post modulation and FMA. I know how to find what I'm talking about. But if I slap on a like, this is how you sound like that one track that you like a lot, like that, they would have been all over that. I would have been like #1 in the search terms, and that would have been like a career right there. I can't though, like, because like the disappointment that I felt like every hundreds of times I did that was just, it's too much to inflict on anyone else.
At least when I started getting into tutorials, I would search by certain person, like how to Skrillex or how to Bass Nectar or whatever, right? But you veered off from that. I mean, you did have the 75K thing, but for the most part, you veered off from that. But you're the poster child for electronic music tutorials, at least from my experience from the people that I've talked to. From what I'm getting is that you just was like, I want to teach the way that I know that I would learn, and let's just see what happens. You know, I don't want to do this, you know, how to Skrillex, how to do this, how to do that. I just want to teach things that are interesting to me in the way that I am interested in explaining them. And from doing that, you became one of the biggest music production tutorial channels ever. Is that correct? I mean, am I right in assuming that?
It was slightly more complicated than that, but basically, yeah. The weirdness was that when I started doing exclusively advanced stuff, and it was always stuff that I basically had just figured out. So it was like the freshest possible in my head. And I come in here and I'm like, guys, oh man. And I think that a lot of people gravitated towards me as a personality as much as like as a conveyor of information. And that weirded me out when I first realized this, because I realized this when people started asking me to do basic stuff. A whole reason I didn't even touch basic stuff ahead of time is because there are already billions of channels out there that all do basic stuff. Because of course there are. Like, it's the easiest thing to do tutorials for. And if you want to do a tutorial thing, then why not begin at the basics? And so I was like, I don't need to repeat, you know, the universe. So let's go do advanced stuff. And like people were just used to how I said things, and they needed that to be the way that they got conveyed basics. And like that, it worked. You know, I did basic, and like I'm actually planning on doing a whole new FL Basics for the next FL. So like, it's interesting that that's part of the career now too, but it wasn't something I planned on. And that, like, not for nothing, like the current FL Basics for FL12 is linked in the FL12 manual. So like, there's like the FL 0 to Hero, the very first beginning of that is like one of my most watched videos ever. Mm-hmm. And I get a reputation from like the noobs, but from also like the high level producers, from people who know that like all I've ever done really is the advanced stuff. And that was a perfect storm that I also, again, could not have planned if I tried.
Having known you from the advanced stuff, the seamless sauce that you sprinkled on your videos and the way that you explain things, they wanted you to take it back to the simple stuff. It's like, dude, he explains these advanced things so well. I now want him to explain these simple things to see if I truly understand them, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and like ultimately, it turns out that like the blocks that people tend to have when they're like, I need to know X, are like step one stuff. And it's not to say people are stupid. It's that the stuff, again, is not very intuitive, but it helps them to then run through the stuff. And because then like I show them the stuff that they generally would miss. I've absolutely missed, because if people are usually self-taught, and that's what happens when you're self-taught, is that you miss fundamentals and like some clear as day stuff. I'll tell you a story. I again, something else I didn't expect at all. Out of the weirdness that happened with that a partnership I had with that one guy when I started a label one time, I offered lessons. That was the first time I offered lessons, and I didn't really expect lessons to take off, because from my perspective, and even now, everything I know, every single thing I know exists in a video somewhere on my channel. Like, you can go find it. There's nothing, like, if you're that kind of person, you can go dig through that, but that's not really everybody. There's also 1,200 videos that are not terribly well organized, so I can get that. And so suddenly, one-on-one tutoring is worth a lot to people. Like, back then, I charged $20 an hour because I didn't know what I was worth, and I did the lessons, and all of them, every one of them, were all basic level, like, it's a super saw kind of thing. Like, it's a super saw with a filter. Nope, that's a super saw chord. That's also a super saw. That's a super saw lead. And like the story I was about to say about like a particular student I had who, it was a Skrillex song. Like, okay, here's a sound design from a Skrillex song. I'm like, all right, lay it on me. And it's like, okay, it's the lead. I'm like, and it's in this one, I forget the name of the song, but it's the one where the lead's like kind of like up there. And like, it's just a saw wave. It's not even a super saw. It's a saw wave with volume automation. That's what's doing the thing. And like in vibrato, nothing, not a thing. And the only reason that person didn't know that is because they literally never played a saw wave high enough to know what that sounded like in their head to pull that information out. And like, if they don't do that kind of stuff, how could they possibly know? Like, it's all like a reference and contextual and like an experience thing. It's super hard to pull that off in like a on purpose kind of way. As a result, a lot of my like students are people who are missing the fundamentals. And it's not even like Seamless is so amazing thing. It's more like there's a tremendous educational problem in the entire world when it comes to this stuff. It's only really just starting to get solved like now, like in the college level. Like when I was going to college, none of it existed. There was a sound design like half major at Berklee College of Music. That's about it. That's what it was. That was it. And like now there's like whole colleges for like just this stuff. So like, you know, they're getting there. But like people's whole like the way that I view it really is that like I don't think a person's career should be held back. Their creativity should be held back by like basic information like this. Because like as well, I want all of like the weapons. Like I've had high level producers tell me that I'm insane for talking about how like some of the high level stuff I do, because that stuff could have made me millions of dollars. And I'm just like, but how much more awesome this could be made when the person that I teach to do that does something that I could have never considered, because ultimately I want to hear doper stuff.
You have no desire to incorporate the mindset that was, you know, in the early electronic music days, and which was, you know, hey, I figured out how to do this sound or this type of technique, and I'm going to hold it close to my chest because of the novelty that I have with it. You don't do that at all. You're like, no, dude, when I learn something, it's going out to everyone, because I think that spreading the knowledge ultimately is going to help people innovate it and create it into new knowledge that can come back to me, and I could, you know, it's kind of like a recycling thing, right? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. Like some of my students have come up with stuff that have taught me. Like one of my guys gave me a technique that was a kind of a splitting mode, because like I taught him about FM and about the wave shaper in FL, and then he comes back like a week later with this. Oh, check this out. I'm doing a FX split on polarity. So like the top polarity is getting one chain, the bottom polarity is getting another chain. So it's splitting the waveform horizontally, and they're getting processed differently, and then getting reconnected like a freaking zipper. And like I heard the stuff he did with that. I was like, that's insane. I would never have come up with that. And like that's what I want out of life, because like very few, like something else that like a lot of people who are new in music, they tend to think that like the highest level like ultra headliners are these like amazing engineers, and some of them are, and plenty of them are, but the stuff they do is not really amazing engineering. It's dope, it's fun. I'm not against any of it at all, but it's just not difficult, is all I'm saying. Yeah. And like I, however, like relish the difficulty. Like I have hardware, obviously I relish the difficulty. It's like so for me personally, you don't need to go as hard as to do, is the whole point, is what I'm saying. But like I'm still gonna. I kind of did this to myself, what I'm about to say, which is that I am not very impressed by a lot of sound design here anymore. Even from like the people who like made me come in to be a person who loves the sound design, like the people who brought me into this kind of thing. Like it's not really their fault. It's my fault, because like I spent like a decade plus drilling my head into the hardest stuff I possibly could. So like of course I've figured out not necessarily all of it, but at least the large swath, the most popular amount of it. And it's mostly because of an issue with innovation. Now that I see like a lot of it in like a large scale. And I'm not going to say this was like a goal of mine. I'm not like, I'm going to take over the world and innovate all the music. It's like, I just like see that as a kind of a consequence that like the more ammunition that gets put out there, the more like stuff that's going to come up with it. And eventually I might get impressed again. And some of the most impressive stuff I have heard has come from people who've sent me, like when I did the viewer track review streams, has come from viewers.
So looking at the totality, your career, you know, we'll use an umbrella term. What has been the absolute hardest thing that you've had to go through?
Kind of a realization that the top sucks.
Tell me more. Okay.
All right. So I want to preface this by saying that I am not the top. I am nowhere near the top. I am not even close to the top, but I have seen the top. I have seen some people who are from the top, and they have told me of the top, and the top sucks. The top is not for artists. I did that 4-part series on my channel about music business, and like one of the things I touched on is that like success, like top level success, like being a headliner in ultra, has nothing to do with your music. And which is not to say that like you can have bad music and do it. You still need to have good music. It's just saying that like at that level, everything is good music. Everything is good. Because good is easy. Because the music is easy. And that means that like the actual competitive edge anyone's gonna have is going to be in everything but the music. And that means that like if you're gonna be some crazy business sharky guy, then you're gonna do fine, because the music is done and said for. But that's what's left, is that you need to be that kind of like business cutthroat to kind of like just to have the leg. And I really didn't want to play that game, let me tell you. Like, and it's because I suck at it. Like, one of the reasons why my channel works is because I am dealing with like engineering facts. I don't have to worry about like opinions about people liking what's happening or not, because I'm talking about like math essentially. And it doesn't really matter about people's opinions of my music, because as long as the videos contain the math that people want to learn about, that's it. That's the end of it. That's the draw. I don't have to advertise that. I don't have to like fake people into watching my videos, because I actually have what they want. That's like my marketing edge, and is that particular like ridiculous deep dive I've done. By the way, I did this because I did once upon a time assume that the top level people were top level because of their ludicrous engineering jobs. And when I couldn't figure out sound design, and when there was no resource for sound design, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to figure out all sound design from the beginning. And that's when I did the whole like subtractive thing, additive thing, FM thing, all that thing, and like kind of just didn't stop. That was why I did that. And then I did realize quite a bit later that nobody up there knows what they're doing. And it's not really because they need to. It's because, again, all of the real separation comes from like how well they manage the business. And then the actual act of making music is something they've streamlined to a T, like presets, construction kits, samples, like mills, mastering engineers, mixing engineers, all of it. And they have the money for it because the gigs pay. They pay hard. And like, I'm not even really knocking the art of that anyway. They're still in control of that. It's still their songs. They're still making dope music. So who cares ultimately? But that is not to say that like, if you want to be your own guy, that you can succeed. If you want to be like your own like artistically controlled individual, like if you are like the type A-est dude in the world, you might be able to do it. But if you're the kind of guy that just wants to make music and live your life, that life ain't for you. That is not the world you want to go to. I'm telling you right now.
That seems like the cruelest, well, first off, let me say I completely and utterly agree with you. From what I've seen as well, it's exactly what you're saying. But that seems like the cruelest joke of all time, at least in our lives. You're given all this power to create music, to create art that you can hear inside of your head, that you feel inside of you. But at the top, what we consider the top, like the top of the top, it's not like that. It's almost a completely different, well, it is a completely different ball game.
Yeah.
That's so cruel. Why is this a thing?
Well, okay, so ultimately the real answer for all of it, because humans, why else? But let me illustrate you a particular problem that exists with what happened with that guy Carnage. I put up a video in defense of that guy. He did a tutorial video about how he makes his songs. It was bad. It was a bad tutorial. I'm not going to defend that. People started getting on his case about like being a bad producer and like immediately attacking it. My first thought was, okay, let me go listen to this guy's music, and like what I heard basically sounded exactly like what he did in that tutorial. My immediate response to that was, but that was right. That tutorial was exactly what he did. Like, and like people are getting on about like doing proper stuff, not clipping, not, doing the rules thing. And that's why he's not a good producer. I was just aghast by this opinion. Like, how can that possibly be public opinion of this? Like, have they heard his music? It's not that hard. That is how you do it. That's how it happens. It came out later that he absolutely does have ghost producers, whatever, but like what he was doing absolutely still could have done the music he did. It wasn't enough of a big difference that people need to be all like, hang him. Reaction they had is why the top never talks about how they do what they do, because people have this ridiculous highfalutin idea of how hard music is, and when they get shown that it's not, when they get shown that what's happening up there could be done by a teenager with a laptop, they get mad. They get really mad. And so that's why nobody has ever talked about that stuff. That's why DJs don't talk about how easy DJing is. All that junk. It's not even really about secrecy. It's about that people are just rabid idiots about it.
How high can you climb before you start getting tainted by the top?
That top is really only the top if you want to play the big game, if you want to be the headliner. However, there is kind of another path there. It's just unbelievably difficult and absolutely not for everybody, which is that you just are so good that they have to have you, that they come to you. It's a little bit like what my plan was when I started trying to learn about sound design. I was just like, okay, I suck at selling things. I'm a terrible salesman. I'm bad at like playing the dude guy game. Never once like putting on a different color shirt. I'm a tech techie through and through. I am not a front of stage kind of guy. I have to essentially compensate for that by like having exactly what people want, so that like when they eventually, who are they going to call, it's going to be me. That's the kind of thing that like I've been trying to position myself into, and like that is a little bit easier with my little niche that I carved out for myself than what I was just describing, which is trying to break into the actual market by doing ludicrous things that no one else can do. And it ain't going to be to make the next trance anthem, I'll tell you what.
Is there anyone that's at the top, like the top of the top, that you personally believe that isn't tainted by the business or anything like that?
Well, the thing is that like those guys up there are all beautiful engineers. Like I talk about BT, like this guy knows more about the business than anybody, but he's also just a crazy engineer. And it's not even like that they're not engineers or you can't be an engineer. It's that none of that needs that. The popular stuff has gotten so easy and easily made. And like this is also just like a fault of technology. We can do things now that would have cost millions of dollars in the 90s to do just what we're doing right now. It's a little bit insane, the capacity that just like a phone has to just make bangers. It's getting a little real. I've been talking to, actually like around 5 years ago, I kind of talked about there being a massive bubble about this kind of thing. And like the bubble is defining itself when you see things like film score portal mills, where people go to like, there's just a done score that some guy did with like MIDI and Hollywood orchestra stuff, and it sounds like a John Williams tune, and it costs like $30. Like a while ago, one of my tracks got ripped off by a guy who copied it. This is the chain. Let me explain the chain to you. This is how you know there's a bubble. This is a guy who opened up FL, saw my Sometime project, and made minor adjustments and turned it up into like a kind of like a bar scene piece of music, and put it up on some mill, like some like portal where it's like, here, get scores now kind of thing. And like then some dude who was like the third assistant to some sound engineer for an actual movie studio saw that and was like, good, mine, take. And that ended up in like some straight to Netflix like horror flick that I had no part of. I was not part of at all. The chain that would have been necessary to like make a suit for that work is that I would have to sue the studio, and then the studio sues the engineer, and then the engineer sues the portal mill, and then the portal mill sues the guy that actually ripped off my thing. How is it that there's like 7 people in the way of having made the thing and it being in the thing that it's made for? Like that is a bubble if I've ever seen one.
So stepping back a little bit, and the inverse to the question that I asked previous to this, looking at the totality of your career, what has been your absolute favorite thing and the thing that you've loved the most about your career?
Blowing people's minds never gets old. And like, it's not even really stuff that I expected to be mind blowing. That usually is the thing. Like the things that I don't try very hard on ends up being like, people are like, do that forever. And I'm just like, whatever. And then the thing that I'm like, here's 50 hours of one sound, and people are, So like I've given up trying to gauge what's going to go down good, whatever. But the general, usually it's like I open up a patcher and people like, and I'm just like, that's just the top page, and like this isn't even my final form, and like I love it. I try to be modest about stuff, but like I am not necessarily continuously disappointed with people, but I am still a little miffed about like my 2005 self thinking very high level things about like what being a producer was going to be like. And then a lot of people who are at that stage come to me and they're like, oh, here's the sound, I've been trying to figure it out for like 2 years, and it's like an oscillator sync kind of thing with like a saw wave, and I do it, and I'm like, oh, here you go, like 2 moves of a thing and on a piece of serum, and it's done. And they're like, how did you do that? And I'm just like, come on, man.
What do you feel like is the most mind-blowing moment that you have contributed to so far?
There were a couple of like Hada basses that were like people really like kind of went over, like kind of crazy over. Some of the earlier ones were nice because those were like no one had ever heard of anything even close to that before. Then like later I started hearing it in like high level tracks, and I'm just kind of like that felt pretty good. That I'll tell you, it was Hada Bass 9. That was around when I did the Skrillex Bundem remix competition, and I used that particular the stuff I was talking about, the Harmon resampling. And then that video was the first time that I really like kind of like flexed it. I was like, here's the beginning and here's the result, and people were just like, how? And I'm like, I'm gonna tell you how. And then like that's how lifelong subscribers were created. It feels good, man. Yeah. I try not to like talk up myself a bit, but that stuff happened and it was good.
Again, looking into the totality of your career, are you pleased with where you're at and how things have evolved over time?
Yeah, well, like it's weird because when I first started out, and it's weird to pinpoint like when I even decided like this is a thing I'm going to do, because it's just a bunch of steps of stuff that just kind of added up to like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. But like when I did kind of like sit down and be like, okay, well, what's an actual like life goal kind of thing? Like, what do I care about? What do I want? And it's always been kind of like I like to sustain myself doing a thing that doesn't suck. And like I also had a couple of other goals. I had like there was a particular video game that I liked a lot, Descent 2 from the 90s. I was always like, actually, if you go listen to those two games' soundtracks, you can kind of hear a pretty big influence in my own work. I was like, oh, how cool would it be to score a video game, or even to score like a new Descent? Like, I thought about that a lot. And then I'm like, oh, well, how cool would it be to have projects inside FLs as demo files? Because like that's how you know you really like get there. Like the software I'm using is like showing me, oh, how cool it'd be like X, Y, and Z. And I just kind of knocked all that off. It just happened. Like I've hit like a lot of my goals. It's weird. I believe I'm 30 this year, and like I just hit. I have a sustainable career. I did that thing I said. Like I very unfortunately did work on a new Descent game that sucks. I'm sorry, you guys working on that game. I'm sorry. It could have been so much better. I'm sad. I'm glad that you guys tried. Any of you ever hear this? I'm glad you guys tried, but like it wasn't for me. That's also kind of characterized as having achieved a lot of my goals, including interacting at all with the high level industry and determining that a lot of it sucks. And then it kind of shifted away from being like, okay, well, how do I continue to like hit all these rungs or whatever and like do the next level? It is like, how long can I sustain doing this dopeness I'm doing right now? As long as I don't do something colossally stupid, it should be for a while.
If you could start your life over, but retain all the knowledge and wisdom, you woke up tomorrow and you were a baby, but you still remembered everything and knew everything that you know right now, what would you do differently growing up and with your career decisions and everything?
Okay, so I would be a really dangerous person to do that with, and here's why. Kind of like the thing I can do now that I've done what I've done for so long is if you put literally any kind of reference in front of me, I can recreate it. At least enough. I can tell you at least how to do the thing that they did, even if I can't like get the last 10% of making it literally sound identical. I can still do a pretty good job. I have listened to the music. I'm the kind of guy that I like to listen to stuff billions of times. Like I've listened to the same albums over and over again. And what I'm getting at is that if I come into this world 20 years before Pendulum has released any of their stuff, or Prodigy has released any of their stuff, or Skrillex or Noisia or any of these guys have released any of their stuff, me as a 5-year-old is going to blow everyone's mind. And like I will not be merciful. I was born in 1988, so like the 90s are coming and like Jungle was around. So that means that they're ready. They're ready for this to come, and it's gonna happen. And like music will never be the same.
You would take all the techniques, all the knowledge that you have, and all, you know, the pre Skrillex, the pre Noisia, all that kind of stuff, and basically beat them at their own game before they even knew they were playing their own game.
Kind of. A lot of these guys didn't have careers or even knew each other, or like Skrillex was in like a punk band or something. So here's the hard part is that like it would be still pretty hard for me because this is the 90s, so there's no FL Studio. There's barely any kind of DAW. There's only ridiculous hardware, which means that I'm gonna have to go to some studio somewhere and convince them that I know what I'm talking about. That won't be that hard because I can like, even with hardware, I can whip out like a house donk like in 4 seconds, and like that's gonna, I don't know how popular that was back then, but like that should be enough of a credential, you know what I mean? And then I'll have to work on I'm gonna have to use hardware samplers. I'm gonna have to use tape. It's gonna suck, but I'll do it, and it'll wreck people. You'll hear a vocoded Skrillex growl in like 1993.
What's the deepest thought that you've had in the last year?
Well, I'm pretty sure I know how the universe began.
Oh, please do disclose.
This has to do a lot with gravity and time, and also sort of the nature of what matter is. So Big Bang happened, and it created space and time. And when people kind of forget about the whole space and time thing, is that like you think about what a black hole does, and like how it like slows time or whatever to the horizon, that kind of thing. And it does that with tremendous gravitational stress. You can imagine with the gravitational stress of literally everything in the universe together all at once is happening, what that could possibly be like onto something. And like, of course, if that were to break, it would just make time. But here's the weirdness: is that without time and without the Big Bang, there was no matter. It wasn't like an actual black hole with like stuff in it. There was no stuff because the stuff is a result of the Big Bang. The stuff didn't explode out in the Big Bang. The energy, the point of energy that blew up actually is what created matter, because matter, if you break it all the way down to atoms and like what atoms are made of or whatever, little tiny little fractalized rivulets of energy. Like when you look at like Jupiter, you see the big ass hurricane and you see the smaller hurricanes or whatever. Like big energy makes waves of energy, and like if you hard enough, big enough, most ridiculous enough put out of energy creates hard enough, high frequency enough, because again, high frequency stuff is a high power thing, makes it so that atoms are doing all that, because everything's fields, you know, touching stuff, not really touching. So like that, those fields are the energy thing happening. But if that's the case, how could there have been a gravitational distress to cause time and space to break in the first place? Well, this is because without matter in space, the space collapsed into the geometric point. And you've heard the term geometric point thrown around, and that couldn't have been the thing if there was matter as we understand it to be in it, but that's because matter wasn't active yet. But if all of 3D space was collapsed to the one point, that meant that the potential for everything that could have, everything that is, even though there wasn't anything in there, all that was there, that also meant that all gravity was there. And that's where the distortion happened, the snap happened, and then the energy break, and now matter and time.
How did you figure this out?
I want to point out that like I don't don't know thing one about quantum physics, and some people I've talked about some people about this, and a lot about what I'm saying could just be hilariously incorrect on its face at a really basic level. But that is what I feel like it happened without having done any real research. I had a bit about how so you know what a temporal paradox is, like in a Terminator, how like where did that picture of what's her face come from? Because like he brought the picture back, but it was a picture of her, and that's where she got the picture to give to him. So where the fuck did it come from? Like that's a temporal paradox where like because of time travel, some stuff is like out of a loop or whatever. And the thing about the way time actually works is that time travel like that is impossible. Multi-universe stuff like that is impossible. And a lot of that is because if stuff like that were to even become close to happen, temporal phase cancellation would take place. If it's not there, then it didn't exist, and so it doesn't exist thing happens, and then it just doesn't exist. It just didn't happen, kind of a thing. I liken this to I mentioned phase cancellation, and like I called it kind of like temporal band limiting, because like in digital sampling, the Nyquist frequency is what's half the sample rate, and the math that figures out what is supposed to be the right waveform to put out there, despite the high frequency being beyond the sample point's like girth, is because it knows what the band limit is, that the thing can't create a frequency higher than a particular limit of a band. The speed of light, for example, was determined by the nature of the Big Bang because of the way energy comes out. How hard the energy came out is essentially like the thing that determined how fast light could be in the first place. And that also has to do with what I mentioned before about the multi-universe thing not working out, because really simply, just think about, and then again, this kind of breaks apart with the quantum stuff, but think about billiard balls. Thing hits another thing, and the other thing hits another thing. And the idea of multiverse is that, like, what if the thing did the thing, and it's some other things? But, like, if the thing hit the other thing the first place, and it's a different thing that happened, you have to move everything that happened before it all the way back to the Big Bang. That's temporal band limiting, I'll tell you what.
Like, did your brain hurt when you think about these kinds of things? Or is it just natural?
I get bored. This is still just stupid pontification on my part. I don't have a degree. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Are you still doing the metal thing, or is that no more?
No. Those guys are all doing different stuff now. Moved away and such. We were a band since like 2010 until like 2000, around 2016ish. Yeah, we played some pretty big shows, and like those are pretty good. Like actually, like the biggest actual performances I've ever done were with the metal band. I've done stuff as Seamless, but I haven't really done a lot of like going to do Seamless shows. You know.
Do you have any desire to go back and do the metal stuff, or are you just primarily in the electronic field now?
I don't really want to do the metal thing anymore. Like it's fun. Like I'll make metal stuff, but it'll be by myself. Like the band thing isn't really for me.
You more so just like doing things on your own. That's the big lure with electronic musicians, right? Is that you can do everything on your own, right?
Yeah, and when I ask, like, you know, I'm not trying to be like, what is the value of other people? Like the when you ask about like, you know, getting a drummer and like doing all these, like I actually am going to buy the setup. Like I had this idea to set up some live stuff in here, but just for me, I'm not going to go places with it. That's just a hassle and a half. And like I don't rate the kind of money that I would need to do that. For now, no, I'll stick to streaming. You
mentioned that you basically, you know, you had your goals at the very beginning. You just like all of a sudden started ticking them off. And you're like, whoa, this is like I'm actually ticking them off like pretty relatively quickly. So what's the goals now? What's the goals you're trying to tick off now?
Well, it's mostly just about increasing sustainability. Like it's kind of a boring adult response, but it is the response. The goal for the YouTube channel has always been to kind of like accrete kind of get a critical mass that I can appreciate over time, that like can be live on its own, just kind of do its thing. And like the difficulty with that is that the stuff doesn't always stay relevant. Like the tone of what people want to learn about has changed over the years. Like in the beginning, in the 2012 time, I happened to be in like the perfect storm of like what people want to know about. And like I know for myself that like the same stuff that I'm doing is still the stuff that people are getting out of like the future-based craze, just lighter, like not as much distortion and compression and filtering, but still the same basic stuff. But like unless I tell people that, they don't think I can do that. They don't think that that's on my channel, and that means that I have to make things that are specifically that. And I guess I got to pay attention to trends in that regard. I still have to have what people want to learn how to do if I want to still be relevant. My goal was really just to learn as much as I can. I am thinking about learning more DAWs, getting on Ableton and like Reason and that kind of thing, just so I can be more helpful to people who are not FL users. I've had plenty of lessons with people who aren't FL users, but it can help for me to be like also to have mechanical knowledge of their DAW, because that's oftentimes the limitation newer people have, is not really just not knowing their tools.
I mean, is there still any desire to do your own musical project and like actually have like a quote unquote traditional music career? Are you kind of like so tainted from the knowledge of the top that you're like, nah, man, I'm just gonna do whatever I want when I want? It's
a little bit that, but it's also like it's a bit difficult for me to focus on music as a concept, just because the only reason, like, I'm pretty much not gonna sell music anymore. Like, I'll still make music, but I'm not gonna sell it. Like, it'll be available for free, and then I'll sell the projects, because like that's my draw as like a business. But music has never really been that serious for me as like a thing. It just happened to be the thing I can do because my parents started me where I did, and because like the opportunities that were available to me were like music flavored, and I had that like key available to me. I really didn't have a total choice in like the acquisition of those particular skills, which is not to say that I hate it, that I'm like, I hate music, but like I like the engineering a lot more. I like how the things are done, and like, which is why I'm perfectly fine to let people just have everything I know to go do their own thing, because like I am not going to focus on the music as hard as they will, pretty much at all.
So do you feel like your quote unquote, using layman's terms, like your passion more so is just the love and the drive that comes from learning something and learning something that you're interested in? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. And like, this manifests pretty clearly in my music, because all the tracks that I like the best, that were the best tracks, that like some of the best ones that I performed, were all ones that I just snapped out immediately because it was just something I was learning how to do. It was centered around a technique or a plugin or a concept that was new to me, that I was experimenting with, that a track sort of formed around. Like those are the ones that end up being like the real pieces of music for me. And it's because they were focused on what I actually care about, which is the engineering. New music is really just like a vehicle for me to experiment with things. Yeah. And like that's kind of why I see my tracks as like teaching aids more than,
looking at everyone, students and people in the industry and everything, what do you see people doing that is the biggest waste of time, potential resources, that you just look at and you're like, oh, if you just stop that, you'd be on the right path, you'd be doing the right, you could understand this, you'd be growing the way that you want to be?
Well, the problem with that particular like opinion is that it's a bit of a self-centered one, and like I will absolutely say I'm not free of it. I totally do have opinions on some things that are like that, but like as I got older, I definitely saw that like wasting time about that kind of stuff isn't exactly what that sounds like. It's a massive waste of time. It's because other people are going to like other stuff, and that's going to be that. But if we're going to point out to anything, it's going to be Big Room House. Like that in particular. See, here's the thing. Like I really, this was like on the cusp of me, like this stuff tested me. This was on the cusp of me having this realization that other people are entitled to their opinions. Then Animals happened, and it was really popular, and it was a nice track. It was a bit minimal. I didn't really think it was all that special, but hey, people like to dance, so that's nice. And then like Pendulum started doing it, like with the Night Party stuff. Like they started putting that crap in there, and then like other artists that I followed started putting that crap in there. And then like I noticed that like a lot of really big guys that were doing lots of really nice stuff that I liked really only doing that because it happened to be popular at the time. And that like once Big Room happened, and then Festival Trap happened, and now Bass is happening, like they're just following it right along. And I don't really see that as a waste of potential, because everything's got to evolve, everything's got to like, you can't, Skrillex didn't keep doing Skrillex. Like he let Zomboy keep doing Skrillex. So like that, I actually kind of felt a little personally betrayed by that, actually. When was it after Bangarang? What did he even do? There was an album he did that was just full of like a bunch of light stuff that I was just like, why? As like a kind of like hungry kid for that kind of thing, I'm just like, well, how would you like, I didn't perceive there to be an end to like the potential for that kind of thing, but like we never do. The consumers have no concept of what it took to create the things, and who knows if that was like the last ditch effort, the last breath of years of research that couldn't possibly be replicated. Like that's like not something they were privy to, but they do. They know when the things are done and when they're dead, and if they liked it enough and it worked well enough, they'd keep doing it.
The internalization and the measuring of one's value to others' opinions is the great fall of music producers. Is that what you're saying?
It's just what happens when art and capitalism meet, with the idea that like, because if consider what like composers and stuff were like back in the day. They were paid to do with that, like on commission level, but by like the governments. Like this is where the term patronage come from. The idea that like art is inherently not a very lucrative thing, but it's awesome and we want it, so we're going to like essentially break capitalism by paying for it unnecessarily. And then like as modern times happen and technology happens, the idea that like the art itself could actually be the vessel for the creation of value, that you can use that to like also sustain it, is a very modern thing, like a couple 100-year kind of thing. And we're seeing, I think, kind of I hesitate to call it late stage, because that posits the idea that it ain't going to get worse. Basically, like this is why I was saying before about how like the music doesn't matter, it's everything else about it, because like that's what happens when the commodity becomes popular, of any kind of commodity, whether it's art or not, honestly.
Do you feel like there is a theoretical situation where art and capitalism can not only coexist but harmoniously exist, where they build off of each other and they just keep going up?
Well, that kind of thing is like sort of what Patreon's about, because remember that like whole middleman nonsense we're talking about. Like Patreon removes middleman, which is always a big shot in the arm to like low level, not top end producer kind of people of any kind of in any industry. So that, as long as like that kind of stuff, like Kickstarter kind of started that idea, the idea that like a large project could be financed directly from consumers, and that's a modification of the capitalist idea, which is entirely born of technology. Because in the past, the whole network of middlemen thing was mostly because because you needed them to like transport stuff and like send letters, and the managers, the agents, those people, which are important when you're at like the really high level where like an entire person's worth of work exists for them. At our level, no. That is a large waste of money. And those people exist at this level because there's so many of them, because the bubble is so dense that they have to go farther and farther down the chain to get work.
So with everything that's going on with your career right now, we talked about your future goals that you want to achieve and everything. So sustainability is the big goal right now, at least, right? In the foreseeable future, more sustainability. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, more sustainability. And also to quote Mr. Bill, do more dope stuff.
So why Seamless? Why the name Seamless? I know the whole SeamlessR and the R is silent thing, but like, why Seamless?
Seamless was a video game tag I chose. And like my name, the Seamless, came about when I started playing Half-Life 2 Deathmatch. Still like my number one favorite FPS multiplayer shooter. Seamless, I had a bunch of names. Like eventually Seamless was the one I landed on. And about that time was when I got good enough that I started recording footage and making frag videos. And that was when I made my YouTube channel in 2008. And none of those videos exist up there. Like they're all unlisted and stuff. But like if you go way back, you might find some. But that's where Seamless, the word, came from. R came from when I started trying to make accounts with the word seamless, because this is 2008 and this is the internet. So everything that's a real word is already taken. The go-to kind of thing is like what you see on my Facebook page, like the official thing, right? You go Seamless Official or Seamless Music or Producer, like all that really stuff. And that just felt so dumb. So I was like, I need Seamless, you know what, R for, you know, it's the real. I'm the real Seamless. That's it. All right. SeamlessR. That's what's happening.
Why did you cut the beard? Why did the beard get cut? What happened to the beard, man?
Well, I miss soup.
Can't have soup and a beard.
Well, you can't have soup and like a 1.5 foot long beard. Like you can have like a beard, but it got, I don't know if you've ever had like long hair. Long hair comes with its own particular challenges, but it's behind you. It's in your back. You're no. All right. Like that got to be an issue, like a lot. Okay. Like in my keyboard, I couldn't play guitar. It got caught in doors. Have you ever had your face pulled off? Because I have.
So no more beard. That's out the window.
Like it only got that long because I was just unbelievably lazy, and then y'all got really into it. Like people, the viewers were just like, the dude with the beard, you wizard. And it's like, wow, okay, again, a step I didn't expect to make. That now I guess I'm wizard branded. I even cut it more than once. That was the second time. This is the second time I cut it. There's a video up there last time I cut it to a drum and bass remix of the Cowboy Bebop theme I made.
Do you eat a fair amount of soup, man?
I mean, no. I mean, regular food was pretty well like affected too. Let me tell you.
What's the gnarliest story with when your beard was long? I mean, you talked about like getting caught in doors. I mean, what's the craziest thing that happened with it?
I've fallen asleep at shows, and my bandmates have like put like ping pong balls in there that I wouldn't have found for like a half a day. Like, because I can't feel it. It's not heavy. I can't see it. Like, until I go like pet my beard and like it's at a ping pong ball. I'm like, oh.
Do you miss it? Do you miss it at all?
Not really. I really don't. Like, I'll tell you what though, what's a lot of fun. Like, I have really curly beard hair, and like my big beard is curly, but I have a straightener, and like a hair straightener works on the beard when it's that long, and it actually looks kind of dope. It looks like an actual like kind of like wizard like looking at like beard kind of thing with the hair, especially. Like it all kind of comes together to what I refer to as omni hair.
I can't handle this, man. Final question for you. Did you have a good time?
I did.
Who do you want to have come on to the show, man?
Let's see. Have you already done Virtual Riot?
No, I would love to have Valentine. I'm
not totally sure how to pronounce that, as I am unsure of the language of origin. But yes, that guy. I mean, can always try to hit up Skrillex. I'm sure he'd be real interesting to talk to.
I'll try and hit up Skrillex. I'll see what he has to say about the top, man.
Yeah, he's been there.
He is the top.
He carved it out of the Grammys. I'll tell you what, though, coming up soon is going to be when I open up the registration for the sale lessons that happen during July every year. Because right now, my lessons are the most expensive they've ever been at $150 an hour. Oh, dang. Yeah, which is actually still pretty cheap. Like, I know some people do it for like 300, 400, 500. So, like, you know, the sale is going to come around, and I'm going to put that right in half. And people want to get lessons, that'll be the time to do it.
That's amazing. Guys, $150 an hour truly is not that much. When I was learning social media marketing, there was people on the low end who wanted $500 an hour. So $150 an hour from a dude like Seamless, beard or no beard, is totally good. You guys should hop on that.
That's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seamless. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming in, from listening, from partaking of the wisdom. We'll see you back here next week on Behind the DAW.
If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.